May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. Or, you're an officer. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. That's familiar to anybody? About 1.4 to 1.8 million young men and women who took that oath died under the orders of that oath. Memorial Day is a time to reflect on that. I don't know that I've done that in a service yet here, but it's interesting. It's an interesting coming together of Pentecost and Memorial Day on this weekend. Now this is by Jimmy Barlow, 2005. Remember me as your son when you used to doctor my bumps. Remember me playing in the dirt. Remember me crying when I would get hurt. Remember walking to get my diploma. Remember arguing and saying, I'm gonna. Remember me as a man doing my job. Remember me, and please do not sob. I did what I had to do no matter what. I was heavily trained and I fought. No regrets, as I am in a wonderful place. Remember me when you look at my purple heart in the glass case. In boots on the ground, our children's feet, toes to hold the tags. And from John McCrae, who wrote this in May 1915. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt the dawn, saw a sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Tomorrow, set aside as a day of remembrance. This isn't, sometimes we confuse it with Veterans Day, and we brandishing it on veterans, but this is a day when we reflect on those who have died fighting our wars. Now, did they die for freedom? Did they die for God? Did they die for country? Did they die for family? Did they die for friends fighting next to them? Did they die for future generations? Did they die because they were ordered to fight? Did they die because they gave their word that they would defend this great nation? Maybe some of all of that. Maybe some of all of it, yes. How do we honor those brave men and women? you have a little, tell me what you know about Memorial Day and how it got started.
I think it was to honor the Civil War veterans.
Yeah.
Originally.
Yeah, some women in Charleston about 1865, they called it Decoration Day, and maybe it's still called that in parts of the country, but they started putting flowers on the graves of the Confederate soldiers. Yeah, yeah. There were some druggists in the North that heard about it, maybe it was through Logan, who heard about it, and they started it like a few years later up there, and they called it Memorial Day. There's another story that I find very interesting. It occurred in Charleston, South Carolina, shortly after the war. Recently freed slaves went to a mass grave of Union soldiers and dug them up and reburied them. The slaves, recently freed, did their service of church and their response to their faith in God by digging them up and reburying them about the same time that the Confederate widows and orphans were placing the flowers. Very interesting. How are you going to remember? Now, you can go to the lake, fish, drink beer, play ball, but watch a race, shop. It's the American way. Yeah, everybody's going to go shop. Because you have the freedom to do any of that, don't you? You have the freedom to do any of that. You have the freedom to remember or not. Because it wouldn't be freedom if we said, oh, you got to remember this way and do it this way.
Use your freedom.
Sure, if it works.
You broke the last one. Why would she give you one that works?
Yeah.
Darth Vader.
Frank? Hold stand by. Frank?
What color do you have? White, okay.
You ask questions asked a lot in churches nowadays. You may hear me. Hello. It's white on the bottom.
Now I know.
Back to Ezekiel. From Job. Your hand shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember that you molded me like clay. Will you now turn me to dust again? Clothe me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bones and sinew. You evidence that you understand that God is working within you by how you live your life. It isn't to just affirm that, yes, I've read this, I understand this to be true, I'm going to work out the math so that I will be in heaven. I don't know about you. I just made that part up, but that's the way we do a lot of our thinking about this, don't we? We work out the math so that we somehow make it and others don't. Do you evidence by your life that you are a Christian? What oath have you taken that you live by as a Christian? Well, you know, out of chaos, there comes new creation and dance. Out of chaos. What we've done is we've taken our faith and we have so pasteurized it and made it so homogeneous that there's no texture to it and there's no life in it anymore. And it just doesn't go anywhere. What is it that motivates and animates you about your faith? And how do you tie these together with Memorial Day?
When I was a young girl, we went to the cemetery. to visit the graves of my great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War. And I looked at the statue, and my dad would always show me his name, and I'd rub my finger across it. And then on the way home, we'd always have a picnic. And Memorial Day brings up sadness, but love and joy that I had all those memories. You can't take them away. They're there. And I never knew him, but yet I did.
Anybody else?
I think the fight for freedom changes as we move through life. I think the fight for freedom changes what we're fighting for and how we fight. To answer your question earlier, as a Christian, I think we seek and serve and love God and ultimately learn to trust Him. As I think of Memorial Day, I think of what people they died for, basically something they believed in, something worth saving, and it's because of that I fear that if our country doesn't follow the right path, that it really didn't matter that they died. You know, what they died for was short-lived, and I think it can live longer. And so I'm saying that because it renews my battle to keep the country moving in a positive direction. And it's above, you know, it's like somehow it's above politics and things like that too. And it goes back to trusting God and having a nation that's under God. Memorial Day, it's a big day, and I think a lot of veterans on Memorial Day always reflect a little bit about why they're sitting in church with a microphone instead of laying in the field under the poppies.
Until this moment, I never thought of myself as a soldier. But I think I too will serve.
Have you ever stood at a graveside, an open grave, with a headstone standing alongside it? And the service is for a military man killed in action, 23 years old, his wife hugging the gravestone, couldn't draw her away from the open grave. Have you ever thought about that? I cannot get that widow, that young mother, out of my mind on Memorial Day. God bless America.
On the same lines of mothers who, through their hardship in life, realize that God is the way to live your life. And what they grew up in understanding of God was not the true God. He is much more. That we need to follow Him in prayer and in our lives, that we give our lives up to God, and that the sacrifice that family can do or have done to catapult the future generation to follow Christ. To me, that's war. It's a warrior to also.
That does go deep. We are loved by a God that loves us through death and into life. We are loved by a God who would very much identify with the widow that you mentioned. Lost a loved one, on our behalf. We are loved through it all. What are you going to covenant to do about that? Not just intellectually, not just mentally. Think about it. But what are you going to do to take this love in deeply and let it put you back together in a new way? What are you going to covenant to do? How are you going to live your life? How are you going to love God and your neighbor and yourself? We're going to do it here, above politics, above the aisles. We're going to do it through the Christ, and we will covenant and travel together and hear each other. May we be makers of peace, and may it begin with us.